And we're glad you're watching OpenLine. If you just happen to be coming into us on OpenLine, make sure you get in and get on that phone, 737-7587, so that we have enough time to answer a few more questions. Any of those legal questions that you've been wondering about, you've been pondering, this is the time you get that free advice from one of the best in the business, Kevin Kennedy from the Kennedy Law Firm. All right, Kevin, we are going to go back to the lines right now, though. Ann is on the line with us. Ann, good evening. Do you have a question or a comment for Kevin?
Yes, I do. I have an adult son who is an addict, and I'm concerned about leaving him cash or anything, and I'm thinking I need a trust. What do you recommend?
I absolutely, in that situation, would recommend getting a lawyer, setting up a trust, have a trustee. If there's a family member that you can trust, that would be good. If not, banks do it all the time, and we would set those funds up where they can receive so many funds. Let me say this, too, about a trust. If there was ever an urgent need, someone who has a trust has a right to file a petition and say, hey, we've got to have medical treatment. There's all this money. I only get $5,000 a month, but it's going to be, can I invade the trust? And the courts allow it all the time. But it's monitored, it's supervised, and so absolutely unequivocal, because if you give it to them, it's gone, and then they will wish you had from taking those steps.
All right, Ann, thank you so much for watching this evening, and thanks for your call. We really appreciate it. Kevin, I was talking to you during one of the commercial breaks, and let's just say I'm asking for a friend.
Hit it.
But this is interesting to me. So, like utility companies in your cities, there is a monopoly. They're the only game in town.
Tell it.
So if you have a situation where you're in a homeowners association and you need a situation taken care of, you have paid that utility company. 2 years later, they still haven't taken care of the situation. They say that you're just not their top priority. Do you have any kind of recourse?
Well, remember, we have these state agencies, Tennessee Consumer Affairs. You can file a complaint. Of course, they're going up against this monopoly. But again, where we have a little power is through our political power. And the representatives, you can call and say, I want you to file a complaint, do a congressional investigation. Why is that important? Because so much of those industries get funded and regulated, and if they blow them off, well, then they are really irritated and said, you know, my constituents have a right to be dealt with in fair play. So that's one of your last options. So you can go to the state and file your complaint, and you can always hire a lawyer. And the third is our political. You know, there was a circumstance that I was confronted with, and people were moving, and it was a church deal. And I remember telling those officials, I said, you will have awakened the giant if you march. They weren't. I said, you'll see more legal and political pressure. Well, legal, you know, the government has more lawyers than anybody. It didn't faze them. But when we talked about political pressure, they understood, and we got it solved.
I will definitely.
So that's why you need to keep honorable people in the legislature and in the Congress, people that you believe in, that will stand up for your rights.
That's right. So important that you go and make sure your voice is heard in these elections. Again, asking for a friend, but that's great advice, and I'll definitely share that.
I'd use it for my own family.
All right, here we go back to the lines right now. Jim is on the line with us. Jim, good evening. Do you have a question or a comment for Kevin?
Yes. I am a member of the local retirement center, and I'm a member of a local retirement center, and I had some concerns once about some guys getting donations and putting in their pocket. Okay, so I brought this before the board, and I said that the appearance is theft if they do that instead of doing it another way. Well, when I went before the board, they decided I was out permanently because I complained.
Yes. Well, you know, that's not a good situation, and you have to keep a pulse on those kind of private individuals, and that would be a prime case to hire a lawyer, and a lawyer could just send a letter back and say, I want you to reconsider, because you do have a right to voice what you think is right and wrong within the, you know, praise the Lord, sometimes somebody will stand up for others. It's been said, strong people stand up for themselves, stronger stand up for others. So I salute you, and I wouldn't let that go by. You know, they can say, just get rid of him, he's a troublemaker, he's too smart, he's going to create problems for us. I wouldn't stop there.
All right, good to know. Jim, thank you so much for calling in this evening. Kevin, a little bit earlier, you were talking about tort reform, so I know we had to go to commercial, so kind of tell us tort reform.
Well, you know, it's a popular thing that we can say, hey, why don't y'all reform tort in the state of Tennessee? Why don't you make workers' comp harder? Because all the industry, and by the way, did you know all the industry all around the country wants to come to Tennessee? Well, because our workers' comp laws are friendly to industry. But when they become friendly to industry, they also don't become good for the worker, and the last vestige of hope is the lawyer. So when you squeeze down the little man, yes, the big man can really flourish. So I'm always resistant. You never want the courthouse doors closed. And they say so much, okay, you buy a new car, there's a problem. We can go sue them, take them to the courthouse. Guess what? In the buyer's premium, they're saying arbitration only must be submitted. Okay, well, they've closed the courthouse doors. Do you think you have a bigger right, less rights? I'll explain it to you. You'll have less rights. Anytime they say you cannot bring your lawsuit, it hurts the average man, because it's the fear of the unknown that makes these companies come to the table and settle. So tort reform, it's wonderful to talk about, but always look at the end result. You've heard it said throughout the military all these years, follow the money. Where is the money? Then you can always ask that question as you try to analyze what's being tried to sell to you and to the unions and whatever.
All right, so many great things that you've been able to share this evening, Kevin. Thank you so much for all the calls that we've had this evening. It's just been nonstop with the calls, and I know they've helped a lot of people. Kevin, in about our last minute and a half, I always like to ask you words of wisdom, kind of what's on your mind this evening?
One of the things that I've seen challenging has been subrogation. Let me share it with you just for a moment. If you had a car wreck and you had medical insurance, and your medical insurance is paying all these bills, and the other company says, hey, I'm going to offer you $100,000. You say, well, I won't take that, but I'll take $125,000, and they pay you. Well, guess what? You may not have realized there is a subrogation that has to be paid back to your insurance if it's Blue Cross, and then their bill may be $125,000. You said, I didn't know that, Kev. That's why you're watching this show. You always have to make sure that the subrogation is taken care of before you get your monies. That's why it is so critical to have a lawyer all along the way. And if you don't, they say, well, the subrogation is $30,000. That's good. So you give them a $30,000, and then in 30 days later, they say, well, that was only the first part. Well, you said I could have settled it if I'd known it'd been $60,000. A lawyer knows those tricks. Don't try to do it on your own, because you will regret it, because you can't get a fair shake. That's the word. My last words, I'll say this, in the jury trial, I was there. Injustice for one man is injustice for all men. And I'm so grateful for the attorneys and the judges that do their best to bring justice for all Americans. Keep those courthouse doors open. Seek, and don't be so backward. I can't do this. Don't tell me what you can't do. Tell me what you can.
Absolutely. Injustice for one is injustice for all.
Absolutely.
Really, really great words. If you would like to know how to get a hold of Kevin Kennedy, we're going to tell you right after this break, so make sure you come on back with us. You're watching Open Line.